year was 1999, and the world as we know it was about to change. Everyone was in a frenzy with Y2K right around the corner, and they needed to blow off some steam. And that happened to come in Woodstock 99. This was to be the biggest concert of the millennium, and it turned out to be one heck of a mess. So that's what David and I are talking about today on this episode of Full Throttle Thursday. We are going back to Woodstock 99, talking about a couple of recent documentaries that went out. Let's go.
Successful people learn how to make their minds work for them.
We're Life is Now, and this is the Successful Mind Podcast. Hey everyone, BT, and welcome to another Full Throttle Thursday. Got David here with me, and we're going to be talking some pretty interesting stuff today. I always say that, but this is especially fun because this is bringing us back, some 23 odd years ago. Today, the focus of our attention is going to be on the Woodstock 99, but we're also going to be bringing in a little bit of Woodstock 69, maybe a little talk about 94, maybe the Woodstock brand as a whole. And what's interesting about this is they recently released a 3-part documentary series on Netflix that you and I both had an opportunity to enjoy, and it sort of satiated my appetite to go dig a little deeper in here. And I know you wanted to do the same. You're a big music lover, so let's go ahead and get into this.
Well, I wouldn't say that I enjoyed the Netflix documentary. It was pretty scary.
It was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. I enjoyed the full blown content of what they're putting out as far as this information, because a lot of people want to just sort of brush this underneath the rug, and now that we're 20 years beyond it, people want to know more about this crazy festival.
I'd have been out of there the first day.
Oh my God,
there's
absolutely.
no question. Not even a question in my mind, because that's not my thing, to be jammed in like sardines with 400,000 people.
Absolutely.
When it's 100 degrees and everybody's on every kind of drug imaginable.
Exactly.
And drunk.
Yeah.
And naked. Like, now I'm going.
Yeah. So just to fill our listeners up who may be unaware of this, because maybe they're doing other things at this time, but we're going to be referring to a couple of documentaries in particular. One of them is the 3-part Netflix documentary that just came out. That one is titled Trainwreck, Woodstock 99. And then the other one was one we found on, I believe it was HBO Max is streaming it now. And it's a series called Music Box, and that's called Woodstock 99, Peace, Love, and Rage. So we're going to be referring to those, as well as bringing in some other information from the other festivals that went on. I think that most of our audience probably knows what the original Woodstock was in 1969. If not, jump on Google really quick and look that up, and you'll have a base of reference. So now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the human psychology in this crazy 99.
Well, the thing that was interesting, so I've actually watched this 99 one now 2.5, 3 times.
Okay.
And I also went in and watched the HBO version of it, right? Which I thought brought more information to the. I thought the Netflix one was very narrow in their focus, right? The HBO one had a more broad scope, and it gave you more information. But here's the craziest thing about this: like the reason that I wanted to talk about it for me was the mindset behind it. It's like, what the hell caused that to happen? Because you got 400,000 people losing their freaking mind.
People who normally wouldn't lose their mind.
Well, you would think they normally would, right?
But
so it's a real interesting lesson in human behavior and what could possibly go wrong. And I think this is one of those situations. Like, I'm not one of those big conspiracy guys on the monster or the evils of capitalism, but in this case, I would say that it played a definite role of it in 99.
Oh, sure.
Because of what they did to manipulate 400,000 people in the middle of a 100-degree 3-day event. So it's interesting because if you watch it, you have several different angles by which they're telling the story, right? So you have the documentary guys that are telling the story. They're interviewing guys that were there, that were attendees. They're interviewing people there that were security, that were there. They're interviewing the producer and Michael Lang, who put the thing on. They're introducing some of the news people that were there from MTV and some of the bands, right? Did I get everybody?
Yeah, you
I think
did. You got them all.
right?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. A lot of people being talked to.
A lot of people being talked to. So, well, what's fascinating is basically everybody has the same story. It's not my fault, right? Everybody that was involved. Yeah, leave with that. It's not my fault. It's not my fault, right? And it's like, oh, that's really fascinating that everybody's coming from this place where it's not my fault. Now, I watched it and I was like, if you were going to blame this on any one individual, you would, and Michael Lang would be the person to take responsibility. It was his event, right? Like if I put it on, I would take responsibility from the fact that this became a complete shit show because I didn't prepare properly for it, right? Forget about motives. I didn't prepare properly for this event, and it was obvious I didn't prepare properly for the event. But I think it was also an exercise in everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Yeah. And it all went wrong at the exact wrong time, right? So it's like you watch from day one, you watch the entire crowd and mindset begin to dissolve into anarchy.
Oh, there's a major deterioration happening.
Yeah. So what did you think about when you were watching
as I'm thinking about it, all I could think about was, all of these people, first of all, are on a gigantic Air Force base, a decommissioned Air Force base, and it's really, really hot because those runways and tarmacs, I've been to air shows at Edwards Air Force Base out in California before, and you're out there for an entire day, and if you can't get into one of those hangars to get a little respite from the sun, I don't know how people can even handle it. Yeah. I was outside this weekend near Blacktop, and I was only out there for 10 minutes, and I wanted to just curl up into a ball and cry myself to sleep.
Yeah, it's all concrete and blacktop.
Oh, it's so hot. Yeah. So not only that, but then you've also got, they confiscated all their water on the way in. So, you're going there for 3 days. You're bringing your camping supplies. You're bringing your sleeping bag, your tent. You're bringing a bunch of water so you can hydrate. They took all that stuff away, which immediately to me was like, that's crazy, right? So now you've basically said...
they took their food and their water away.
Water, yeah. They were trying... And I get, you don't want people bringing in but they're going to bring in shit anyways. They're going to bring in alcohol. They're going to bring in drugs. They're going to get it in. So let them bring it in. People will still... support your vendors,
right?
That
they let them bring in. They let the drugs go in.
Which is so crazy. And that'll be another situation we talk about here in a moment. But as I saw this start to develop, after the first day, it really started to set the tone. You could see that people were really starting to become frustrated with the conditions of the festival and also the conditions with which they couldn't use the bathrooms, they couldn't get drinks of water, they couldn't do any of these things. And if you're hangry or if you're thirsty or any of these other things, you start to lose your mind. Like I've said things that have come out of my mouth before where I get just flat out pissy when I just haven't had enough to eat. Yeah. And these people are tripping balls off friggin' any kind of drug they can put in their mouths. And not only that, which blew me away with this whole thing, you've got 3 straight days of this festival. They didn't give them any downtime, right? Because immediately after that last band closes out the set on Friday, you immediately roll over into the rave hangar and they're jumping all night long. This music is playing. So there was no downtime. As I was sitting there watching it, I was thinking to myself, when are these people going to sleep? Now, here's what's fascinating. After doing a deep dive in this and watching both documentaries, I started listening to another podcast where they were talking about people who were actually there. You get very different narratives from every single person. It's your perception about how you perceived it. The people that I listened to, they loved it. They said it was the most amazing thing. They would do it in a second, right? Yeah. Then you watch these documentaries and immediately you're like, well, what is MTV's role in all of this? Because, Kurt Loder was really rough on them. All these MTV VJs were very rough on him. And then you've got the promoter side of things. You got the John Scher who came across as a complete villain in this thing.
And also that we got to remember something. They also did a huge pay-per-view event on it, which they had people going out inciting people to take their tops off and do that for the pay-per-view because the pay-per-view was R-rated. And it was everything goes, and that's what they were trying to show. Everything goes in that thing because they want the sales.
And when you're charging $60 for a pay-per-view weekend, they made close to it wasn't really reported how much they pulled in from pay-per-view, but they believe it was probably around $30 million just from the pay-per-view buys alone. Really? Because people knew this was going to be an event, they just didn't know what kind of event. In '69 it was its own thing, and then in '94 it became another thing because of the wetness. And the rain and the mud flinging. And then 99 '69, the bands they had on the roll there, like the people they had, for you to be only have to pay like $150, $180 to go for 3 days of that blows your mind. But I think after a while, it really started to sour because you had just a bunch of people, again, tripping on drugs, doing crazy shit, and they just weren't in their right minds. And they were completely and totally distracted by everything that was going on. It was scary.
Yeah. So like, I mean, you can take any talented group of documentary people and you can turn a mass into a witch hunt. I mean,
totally.
You can always show narrative there and
yes.
create a story that doesn't exist. I mean, I think that it was obvious that there was a lot of shenanigans going on and a lot of complete structural breakdowns. I mean, everything broke down. Everything that could break down broke down in there. The toilets were overflowing with shit and pouring out into the grass. Yeah. They break the water line because they can't get water fast enough because they're regulating the water. That is mixing with the feces, which is creating what looks like a mud pit. And people are thinking to themselves, 69 sliding in the mud, Woodstock. We're going to slide in the mud here, and they're sliding in human feces.
Yeah,
I mean, they were covered in feces.
Right.
They had everybody got trench mouth. It was like it was like, oh my God, how do you not know that you're doing this? But when you're tripping balls, you don't know.
You don't know, yeah.
You don't know. You're drunk. You're like,
well, and you're going with the masses. You're just going with what everybody else is doing. It's a total hive mind herd mentality, and that's what these people were doing.
Right.
And I love that you bring the narrative piece into it because you have a distinct vision in your mind, in your head about what Woodstock '69 was.
Right.
And then I do as well. And I haven't really seen the documentary that they filmed, like that concert documentary for 69. And that was one of the things that they talked about in one of the documentaries, I can't remember which one, where they talked about how we romanticized 1969 because of that documentary. That documentary encapsulated the narrative that they wanted to put out there. So when we look back on it now, we're like, oh yeah, that was chill. Nothing went wrong. Everything was great. And the reality was they had riots there. They had to airlift in supplies. The U.S. military had to. They were setting fires to food stands theirs as well. And people also died. But we have selective memory about that one because of the narrative of that film. It's just so interesting.
Yeah, they never told the dark story
They did not
69.
tell the dark story.
I wasn't even there. I knew 2 people died there and 2 people were born. That made headline news back in the day. But the story that I grew up with, and I was 3 years old when 69 happened. So, I mean, I don't remember it as it happened. But shortly afterwards, the people that I was around, it was a big thing. It was a big talking point. Things didn't change as fast back then, right? So that story hung out long. And then the next year, the album came out, which everybody got the album. Correct. And then the documentary came out. And it was, you're right, people remembered it as the story was told. I didn't know about the dark stuff until you started digging and told me. I didn't know that there were riots. I knew about they had to airlift food in. I knew that they ran into a problem because more people showed up than they expected to show up.
Gate crashers.
They then made it a free concert, which was a smart thing to do. Yes. But they tried. See, the airlifting of the food is they're trying to get supplies to the kids.
That's
in '99, they said, fuck you.
They did.
And they raised the price of $12 a bottle of water.
Yeah, they were gouging.
For these guys. It
was supply and demand, and they knew they were in demand, and they were gouging every single piece of it. And that's one of the things that a lot of people that I listened to who were there in these podcasts talked about, the fact that they were going to the ATM multiple times during the day, and they were trying to be sensible about how they drink, how they eat, and all those other sorts of things. But the lines were crazy. The food was, jacked through the roof, and they just was no break from it. And the fact that they couldn't even get the medics were hard to get there. The fire department at one point in time said, screw you, we're not coming in, just because so many people came to this place. And it just was, when you see the footage of that crowd.
Right.
And one woman was saying that she remembers being there for the DMX part. He was a rapper, and he was one of the very first acts that came out. And she was being lifted off the ground without even kicking her feet. She said that she was about 15 rows back, and when the crowd would jump up, she would go with them, and she wasn't jumping.
Because they were so tightly packed.
Because they were so tightly packed. And that right there, I'm surprised more people didn't die just from trampling alone.
I agree. I couldn't believe it.
I
thought it was going to be like a few hundred people died when I watched it. Because you look at that crowd And you look at how the artists were manipulating that crowd, but there are some significant differences that I think make a big difference in this. Because I watched the 69 one again, and I actually had an opportunity to watch the expanded version of the 69. They have a new version. I don't know how new it is, but it's a newer version of the 69 documentary with a ton of added footage in it. It's all positive, but it's added footage. Sure. So it gives you a little bit more of in-depth look at it. And as I was watching it, and I watched this after I watched the Netflix 99, and I'm thinking, one of the major differences here is the aggressiveness of the music. There was not crazy, aggressive, angry music.
Correct.
There was some loud, aggressive music at Woodstock, but most of the music was the 60s stuff, right? There were a couple bands that came out of the 50s. It was all 60s music. Crosby, Stills and Nash, Joan Baez, Santana.
Yeah, it's a lot different than like Rage Against the Machine, Metallica, Limp Bizkit. Like it's a different vibe.
So I mean, let's face it. Music raises emotion, right? We behave very much based on the music controls a lot of how we're feeling, and you put everybody into a mass situation, and then you have somebody come out and they're going, "Let's break some shit."
Yes.
Right. And you ever wake up and he's just talking about anarchy.
Yeah.
He's screaming it. He's giving them permission to do it. What the fuck do you think they're going to do? Yeah. And in the middle of break some shit, they're starting to tear the tower down, the sound tower. That those guys, it's like. And he did nothing. He could have stopped that.
Yeah.
He could have stopped. And the first thing he did when he came off stage was he goes, it's not my fault.
And that's exactly what I was going to say.
Not my fault.
Yeah, and we're referring to the Limp Bizkit set, which really has summed up, like when people think about 99, they want to lay it at the foot of Fred Durst. And you're right, he could have done something to quell that crowd for sure. But the reality is, and we had this conversation last week off air before we got into the research on this, is that as a musician, that's your juice. That's what you're feeding off of that.
Right.
So we can't blame him for doing that. No. Now, he could have done some things to maybe bring it back down. But the reality is, when you look back on it, and they're still performing. They were just at Lollapalooza this past summer, and they're still out there doing their thing. And he's still pissed off about 99 because his career.
Yeah,
took
I saw
a hit.
him make a comment at Lollapalooza about that.
It took a hit, and Fred Durst. But when he came
now
off,
he's got a health issue. They had to cancel their tour.
Yeah, I saw
some
that.
health issue came up for him.
But when he came off stage immediately, it's interesting you said that. He immediately said, "It's not our fault." That was the first thing he said to MTV when he came off. So he knew in the back of his head. Usually, when somebody says that, there's a little bit of truth that it was their fault.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He knew it. In a way.
So, look, he antagonized a tough situation. However, that's the kind of band he is. They know that that's what he's there to do. He's not singing Love and Lollipops, right? He's singing Break Some Shit,
Well, and let me ask you this. Could they have done, so if you go through and you look at the people who played at this festival, they tried to sprinkle, a soft pop female in there, the Sheryl Crows, the
once
Jewels,
per
and things
day.
like that.
Once per day,
which was interesting. But you get to that Saturday, that Saturday night, and you've got Limp Bizkit with a short break followed by Rage Against the Machine, with a short break followed by a 90 to 2 hour set by Metallica. That is nothing but hard.
Right.
And nothing against those bands. They're all fantastic, but you almost feel as if they put those in there. They could have spread them out a little bit more to create a little bit less of a chaotic experience.
Right.
But I mean, you don't probably think about that. You don't know. I mean, going in, I'm sure Michael Lang and John Scher didn't think that people were
that's where I disagree.
Down. Do you really?
That's right. Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you why. At first, I was kind of like, my first thought when we first started discussing, do we want to do this as a topic? And I was thinking to myself about, as we began to research it and I was looking into it, and I was, at first, my first thought, I admittedly was, well, they probably didn't realize this was going to happen, right? And then I went, wait a minute, that's not true. It's not like we haven't had major events like this, concerts go bad before. Right after Woodstock was Altamont with the Stones, where Meredith Baxter, whatever his guy's, Meredith Hunter, got stabbed with a knife by the Hells Angels right in front of the damn stage. It went completely off the rails. And it went off the rails for the same reasons. They hired the Hells Angels for security. They didn't have proper security. They didn't have proper food or nothing. They had nothing there to be able to take care of a crowd that, you're talking, the crowds are the size of a small city.
It is.
Right? And there was nothing there. There was also, now this wasn't an outdoor concert, but there's also the famous Who concert that took place when they had general seating in an auditorium and 11 people got crushed to death.
Oh man!
Right,
Yeah.
running from the stage in the 70s, and I'm sure that there's more. Right.
Sure.
So we have evidence of them going wrong, and how they could go wrong, and what would cause them to go wrong. It seemed very obvious that they gave that no consideration, right? Because nobody was. And then the other thing was that there was some guy there. He was younger. He was like 23, who was 23 back in '99, who tried to warn them about some of the things that he thought that they were running the edge on. He was told to be quiet.
Right. Yeah. Get off this channel. We don't need you in here.
Yeah.
type
Yeah. And he
situation.
was, even in the planning stages, he was trying to warn about some things, and they told him to shut the fuck up. So it was. I think it was extraordinarily irresponsible for them, number one, to even think that they could pull something off with the same kind of mentality as '69. You got to remember something in '69. In '69, there was a pervasive message of peace and love going on, right? There was the flower child thing going on. There was the anti-Vietnam War. There was Martin Luther King. There was JFK. Earlier in the decade, JFK gets killed. Later in the decade, RFK gets killed, right? And then Martin Luther.
King, yeah.
So there was a lot of anti-establishment, but the crowds then wanted to fix it with peace and love. That was the message. That's what they thought the world needed in order to fix the problem, not hate and rage and tear shit down.
Right.
So how they did not know that we're not in '69 anymore is it's unacceptable.
It's irresponsible.
It's
arrogant.
completely irresponsible.
Yeah, completely arrogant. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on is the mood of the time, right? So you're talking about they wanted to fix it in the '69 with peace and love and let's all come together and feel all right.
Yeah.
Whereas at '99, the mood of the country is 4 months prior, the Columbine massacre takes place, right? So that's fueling that. Then you've got the uncertainty, the complete and total uncertainty of Y2K that is just around the corner.
And I think people forget about how nuts that was. I mean,
will
the
never
news
forget it.
was pumping fear
It's very
constantly.
similar to what's happening right now.
Remember they were trying to get executives to fly in planes at midnight?
Yes.
Because they're
Because
like,
they thought
they were so convinced.
the grid was going down.
Everything
it was the end
was
of the
going
world.
down.
Yeah. So Y2K was coming up. Clinton was impeached,
Yep,
right? With the
yep,
Monica
Monica
Lewinsky trial.
Lewinsky.
You've got the popular movies of the time are Fight Club, which was all about rage.
Yep.
You've got Matrix,
Fight Club and how we're never going to be a they tell us we're going to be a star, but we're never going to be a star.
Never going to be a star.
Right?
Yep, totally. So you got Fight Club, you've got The Matrix, you've got American Pie, so you've got violence, you've got sex, you've got it permeating all throughout, and now you're going to throw this concert together, and it's just simmering rage
And
that's
for
happening.
the first time, the average person could tap into porn anytime they wanted because of the internet.
Interesting.
Right? So think about this.
Yeah.
When you and I were kids, it was, we found Dad's Playboy or something like that, right? That was our introduction, which was very mild back in the day.
Right.
This is and when the internet came, right along came the real hardcore porn, and it's everywhere. And there was also the Girls Gone Wild stuff that was going on. So there was a cheapening, a total devaluation of the female ideology as far as respect goes. Like it just went completely down the toilet.
Yeah, and I think that's why, to get back to your point about how these promoters should have been able to see this in the popular culture at the time, there was a lot of craziness that our country was experiencing that was being solved by just screaming and being louder and running into people and going absolutely batshit crazy. And I think that was the big aha for me, was just the arrogance, to touch back on that as well, the arrogance of the promoters, and in one of the documentaries, again, I apologize, I can't remember which one, they do these press conferences every morning where they sit around and the media gets to ask.
It was in '99.
Yeah, okay, they get to ask the promoters about, things that are going on. This is deteriorating. We're noticing that the toilets, we notice the water, all this and that. And John Scher, especially, one of the promoters, he is so arrogant and he's being like belligerent and mean to these pressers that are asking questions. And they're just asking about, why are they not emptying any trash? Why are they not emptying these bins or pumping out the shit from the outhouses. And he's like yelling at them, fix it. You sit here, you try to paint. He tried to blame it on everybody, whether it was MTV's fault, whether it was, these people in the press that are writing bad, poorly stuff. It was just fascinating to me that this guy, and again, he turned out to be the villain of both of these documentaries. It does not come across very well, yet he's still in the business. It's just fascinating to me that was his stance. He was just going to be like, screw you, this is my show, I'll do whatever the hell I want, piss off.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Fascinating.
Well, one of the things, and I got a few different ways that I tried to look at something, was when they were doing those interviews live with the press every morning, I thought to myself, well, one of the things that's very true is they have to control the message. It's spinning out of control, and they can't let that news out that it's spinning out of control, because that could create a bigger problem, right?
Well,
a much bigger problem.
And they're sitting
so they
there.
had to figure out how to control that message.
Yeah. And that Sunday, they're being interviewed live on MTV on Sunday.
Yeah.
And those three guys are sitting on the couch, and they're like, this is the best
thing
event ever. And you're sitting there thinking, after what we just saw on Saturday night with Limp Bizkit and the chaos that was the ripping down the towers around there and stuff, that they could even go on and say those things. But you're right, they probably had to say that. You've got to fake it until you make it sometimes,
right?
Even though outside it is breaking down hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's best.
So here's something else that's different. So, and I can't say that I know that they didn't have this at 99, but it was actually a forethought in 69. So there was a guy by the name, I forget what his real name is, but he went by the name of Wavy Gravy.
Oh, sure.
And he had the hog farm, and the hog farm would go out, and what they did was they helped people come down off of bad acid trips. And they had a whole thing set up at Woodstock for people that were going through having a bad trip.
Sure.
And what they would do is the hog farm would come in, and they would get people. So people would lose their mind because they were losing control. They're having a bad trip. He had a very specific way of talking them back into a good space, teaching them different control things or whatever. I mean, I've never done that, so I don't know.
Strategy to
maintain to guide your own journey, and then he would teach them to go teach other people. So it's spread out throughout Woodstock. So you didn't have as many people freaking out on drugs. And I don't think, the drugs were also different back then.
Right.
For
sure.
I mean, you talk to anybody that smoked pot in the 70s, and they'll tell you the weed back then was so much milder than the stuff that's being pumped out there today. It's crazy. So the other thing was that we didn't have ecstasy and stuff.
Right.
I mean, people were doing acid, right? Most people just smoked pot.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to be like, there was heroin addicts and stuff, but like it wasn't really all that mainstream to be doing coke in 69.
Yeah, right.
That came in the 70s. That got really big in the 70s, but it was a very different frame. But there's a lot of evidence that they actually tried to make things better in 69, and it really doesn't look like that happened at all. They completely lost control of the thing. When you watch it, I mean, it just goes down into complete anarchy that last night. And then here's another thing that I thought was very interesting. They literally go up to the Red Hot Chili Peppers last act, right? They go up to Anthony Kiedis, right? And they're like, you need to rein these guys in.
Yeah, because at this point in time, fires are burning out with
the candles. They're lighting fucking fires. They're burning the place down. And what do they choose to sing? Fire. Jimi Hendrix, Fire.
Yeah.
Come on, go burn. Yeah. Like, that's what they choose to sing. They just like, let's take a gallon of kerosene and just toss it on this thing.
They totally did.
Right? The other thing was this. They had everybody freaking believing that there was going to be a major act come after the Chili Peppers.
That was another thing that was really shady. Yeah. And what it was...
to get people to stay, right?
It just ended up being Jimi Hendrix coming up on the big screen.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was it.
Yeah.
Because people were... they were thinking maybe Guns N' Roses is coming. Maybe, like big bands at the time were going to come together. This band's going to get back together and play a set. And it just fizzled out. And that's when all hell broke loose. They already had the candles, and the candles, the intent behind the candles was great. It was actually to honor those people who had died at Columbine. It was to promote.
They sure didn't seem to give a shit about that.
No, they did not. They did not. And they handed candles to these hundreds of thousands of people. And before you know it, this place is burning. There's some images in these documentaries. When you look at it, it honestly looks like something you'd see after a Scud missile knocks out something in Iraq. It is upside down, vehicles burnt, smoldering. You've got a row of 12 semi-trucks that are just charred, burnt, stuff everywhere.
The diesel tanks on those semis were blowing up.
Exactly. And I was shocked that somebody didn't die on, you see a tower, you see guys on this tall tower. And if you've ever been to a concert, you know how tall those towers can be.
Right.
They're wrenching this tower down, and that tower goes down. And there's people on that. I'm like, how are people not dying? Again, only 3 people died. 2 of them died on the festival grounds. One of them died outside of the festival grounds and was walking and got hit by a car when her car broke down. So you've got 3 people is all that died out of that, which is absolutely crazy. And what blew my mind...
youth was on their side, I think.
Correct.
You and I'd have been dead the first day.
Well, and one of the gentlemen was 40. He was in his 40s, and he had a pre-existing heart condition, and he died of a heart attack in the camping area. But the other one that they feature prominently on the documentary, he died of just basically he dehydration and hypothermia. He was so damn, his temperature was crazy. It was like his internal body temperature was so high, I couldn't even believe that a human body could go that high. Of course he died, which was very, very, very sad and tragic and all that stuff. But the reality is when you go back and you look at this and you see all the things that were going on there, you just see the mindset of people who normally in any given situation wouldn't be doing that. But when you add alcohol, drugs, no food,
naked people,
and you're absolutely wiped out. Like, these people didn't sleep. Like, they're on a 3-day runner. It's not surprising that it went the way that it went. And it's crazy because there was talk about rebooting it for 50. There was talk about doing Woodstock 50 right around the corner. Now, that's not going to happen. That's already been shelved. We are not doing this.
Because Michael Lang died 3 months after the documentary.
He passed away, so that isn't going to happen. But the truth is, what's funny about this is Coachella started the same year. Coachella started in 1999. Yeah, it started in 99.
I was wondering when they started.
Yeah, it started in 99, and it's a totally different experience. And I'm not comparing the two of them because they're very, very different. But when you go to Coachella, the very first one, they gave out water. When the very first one, free parking. Like, they did all these sorts of things that Woodstock 99 did not do to get that festival off on the right foot.
Has Coachella ever gone crazy?
It has never gone crazy.
And it's huge, right?
It is massive. Yeah, it tracks a different kind of clientele. This clientele was all angry, like frat boys out there screaming, jumping around, wanting to do as much damage. And then, of course, you bring in, the sexual assaults and all the things that happened. I think there was only something like 44 arrests the entire weekend out of that, which is insane to me. Partly because there was there was so much lawlessness. The police weren't going to go in there.
I cannot imagine. I will say this though, and not that I think that anybody deserves to be molested in any way, but when you see females walking around completely naked in that situation, it's like how they didn't recognize they were in danger is beyond me. Like, you could see that this was a dangerous situation, that is not a good idea to do this in this situation.
Well, and that was the one thing that Cher said, and this kind of really bothered me, and it bothered a lot of people. I mean, Twitter blew up about this when he said this quote, but it was basically the notion, he had this notion that a woman walking around naked is partly to blame for the sexual assaults. And I was thinking to myself, I get you got to read the room, right? You got to read the room. You got to understand the environment you're in. But the reality is that if you choose to walk around naked in that area, it doesn't invite someone to come and do things to you, which is crazy. But you also need to read the room, and guys and girls alike. But when he said that, I was like, oh my God, is this guy for real? Like, he is totally going to blame these women that were the victims of this because they were walking around with their
Right.
top off. I mean, and if you go back to 69, it happened in 94, it happened in 99 as well. That does not give you the right to do that. And the fact that he did that, I was like, this guy, I'm surprised he isn't, I'm surprised somebody hasn't come and done and chased this guy down.
Yeah, he just found every reason to blame everybody else for everything else. I mean, that was the way that it was.
And the idea behind it, I mean, let's be honest, it was to make money. And that's where the capitalistic greed came into play, profit stock, they called it, all these sorts of things with the jacking of the prices when the demand needed to be met. You could see that this was, and MTV was culpable in this because they were in that Total Request Live. They were really blowing up. They were trying to be, MTV used to be anti-establishment when it first came out. You probably remember those early 80s. It was all anti-establishment.
Yeah,
it's like, we're just this small little up and coming company. By that time, they had completely shifted the message. And,
Right.
when they're making all this money off of pay-per-view buys, that they're going to do whatever it takes to fuel this. Yeah. And I think that this broke down in the planning stages of this, like you said.
Yeah.
I think they cut corners, they cut costs, they did some shady things around ticket sales when they only showed there was only 200 and some thousand tickets sold, when actually there was upwards of 400,000 people that attended,
right.
because there was built-in penalties with the city and all these other sorts of things. But what fascinates me is they cut corners on the important things like trash, sanitation, cleaning out I guess they cleaned out the shitters on Friday because there was a pre-concert Thursday. They cleaned them out Friday and never did it again.
Never did it again.
And then you've also got all these, this security, I use air quotes, this peace patrol that they had. There was really just a short little training for these people, and they were just concert goers. They got there, they got their shirt, and they said, "Screw it, I'm not doing anything."
And there were guys that had those shirts that were selling them for $400
Isn't that crazy?
so that anybody could get backstage.
Yeah.
They were trying to make money off of it.
Oh, totally, selling them for $400 a piece.
The sad thing is that it's obvious that concerts of that size can be extremely profitable because you have organizations like Coachella that continue to do it, and they do it, from my understanding, they do a great job, and everybody has an amazing time, but they plan it correctly.
You can't cut costs. Period.
Yeah. I don't see any this is one of those situations where actually by not cutting costs, you could probably make way more money. You're just not thinking. You're thinking a complete lack mindset, and that causes, it causes people to get hurt is what it does. Because even at a 400,000 event, if everything goes right, you're still going to have injuries.
Correct.
Right?
There's no way you can't.
There's no way you can't.
Yeah, there's going to be people that have heat stroke. There's going to be people that get sick. I mean, I've gone to an outdoor just a one-day festival, a couple of them. You're outside the way we were at the Rose Bowl. It was hot. You're drinking as much water as you can. But even then, there's people passed out. There's a huge medic tent. There's always going to be something. But this devolved so quickly.
In all the concerts that I have been to, and I have been to a lot, almost all of them, there's something that goes wrong. You always have your little group of people that go out of their mind, or they try to push the boundaries, or steal a T-shirt, or they're always doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I've seen mild to wild at concerts in my I've seen some really scary stuff.
Yeah,
and the concerts are that's 17,000 people that I've seen scary shit.
Correct.
I can't imagine 400,000.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to go see these images for yourself. You've got to go see the wave of people, and I can imagine as an entertainer being able to feed off of that. So I don't blame this on Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst. I don't blame this on Rage or Metallica or the Red Hot Chili Peppers even for doing what they did, because they had planned on doing a promotion. They were going to do a special tribute to Jimi Hendrix, and they were actually working with his family on that. That's why if you hear the video, you'll hear Anthony ask Flea, "Should we do it? Should we do it?" And they're like, "Of course we're going to do it." And that's when Fire came out, probably in hindsight, but I don't think they'd say they did anything wrong. Oh, totally. Just flopping around in all his glory, that's Flea, which is freaking amazing. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, they're in Charlotte next week. So that's kind of cool. They're still around. Is that right? And a lot of these bands are still around, to be honest. And I think it's really, really great. It's unfortunate that this had to go the way it went, but we're still talking about it. So it's still in the zeitgeist. And I think the important reason that we bring it up is because the documentaries came out, but also to see what the mindset is around how a cultural moment can actually lead to people who normally wouldn't lose their minds, losing their minds.
Right.
I mean, take the drugs and the alcohol out of it a little bit. If you get in a group of people and everybody starts thinking the same way, you're just going to go over. It's over. You're going to go right along with them. So I don't know. This is a really cool conversation. I loved it. And in '99, I mean, I was just starting my career. I was just getting married. I mean, this happened on my wedding weekend. Like, we got married on the day that the
Surprised you guys
hell
didn't
broke
go.
loose.
I'm surprised
oh my
you guys
God.
didn't go.
Thank God we were on the other side of the country. I'm
Yeah.
not a mass crowd person, but in 99, that Sunday when all hell broke loose and the fires erupted, we were, sitting in a wine cave in Sonoma Valley enjoying our wedding, which is crazy.
I really didn't even know that this was going on at the time. I think I knew that there was another Woodstock going to happen, but I was really busy getting ready to build my business, and I was making some huge life decisions. I wasn't paying attention to any of this shit.
Yeah, it was in your 7
happening.
years of study. It was in your no more TV. I'm going to read.
Right.
I'm going to learn. I'm going to study. I'm going
Right.
to grow. Yeah, you would not have seen this, but it's always great to be able to go back and look at the footage of this. And I know that there was some tragedy there, and I know that there's some victims of sexual assault out there and all these other sorts of chaos that happened. But if you do the research and you go in and listen for yourself, there's people who were there who had an absolutely amazing time, and they look at it as one of the most amazing things they'd ever done.
Yeah, there's people that said that they would go back.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine that, but
Not for me.
But it's also the only view of it we have are those two documentaries. So you actually don't know what it was like to be inside there and how you would have contorted yourself and what you would have done and how you protected yourself. I'm sure there were people that had a blast and it was no big deal for them because they're showing it from the bad side of it,
Right.
And then here's the thing. I think when you're a teenager, all that stuff looks very different than when you're 40 or 50 years old, right? I mean, it's like, it's excitement, it's,
Energy.
that kind of stuff. It's a lot of energy. It's like, fuck yeah, And when you're 50 years old, you're like, no, fuck that.
Get off my lawn, basically.
But I think when you're older, you come from the point of understanding the consequences of things much differently, right? When you're that young, they really don't.
Yeah. For
It's
sure.
Just sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby.
Well, I would love to hear if any of you out there, I don't know if our demographic.
Tell us, yeah.
Oh, please
go
tell
watch,
us.
Go watch it and let us know what you think.
Let us know, first of all, about the documentary, what your takeaway was from it. If you were actually at the concert, I think it would be so cool to hear. I think they should DM you on Instagram. David _P_Nagel. DM him if you were actually there. And please, no fake news here. Please, if you were there, I would love to hear, because I don't know anybody personally who was there, but I've heard from some people like on podcasts that were. I would love to know if any of our listeners
Now, I've known
were there.
people personally that were at the original Woodstock.
That's
yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
That's
but I
cool.
don't know anybody from 94, and I don't know anybody from 99.
Well, if you were one of them, make sure you DM
Wasn't me.
That'd be cool. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this has been great. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
All right, Woodstock 99. I, for one, was not there, but I wonder if anybody out there listening to this or watching this was. So do us a favor, because you found the channel, give us a like. Let us know in the comments below what takeaways you had from watching the documentaries we mentioned. Again, Trainwreck on Netflix, the Music Box on HBO Max. Check those two docs out and let us know what your takeaway was from this crazy, crazy weekend in New York. As always, ring that bell so you get notified when we have these sorts of episodes. Full Throttle Thursday is about having interesting conversations around mindset, and this one was definitely one of those. So if you're a big music lover, I think you'll enjoy this, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast, because we certainly did. It was super, super fun. So until the next time, rock out, and we'll see you on the next Successful Mind podcast. Thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast. If you like what you've heard and you want to know more, go to davidnagel.com/free stuff.